Now let's take a look at the unique features of the enhanced analysis. For a simple random sample, the SRS, usually let's say you want to calculate the counts and percentages. You could use proc_freq. You could add a where statement, age greater than 40. That would be if you only wanted individuals that are over 40 years old. And then you would enter the table statement with the two variables that you want to compare. For example, in this case, it would be these variables A and B. And so this would be fine in a typical analysis. However, what's the problem of doing this if you have enhanced data? The problem is that enhanced, again, use the complex multi-stage probability sampling design, not an SRS. So this analysis would be incorrect. So for a regular analysis and for the enhanced, you will use analysis variables such as your typical exposure, the outcome, and different covariates you might want to adjust for. In addition, for the enhanced study, you also need to add the design variables, which are the strata, the clusters, and the weights. So there will be 3 additional statements and 3 additional variables that you will need to include. You will include the primary sampling unit, or PSU, in the cluster statement. You will enter a weight variable in the weight statements and also a stratum variable for the strata statement. Let's see how we do that. And so how do we include the design variables when doing enhanced analysis? Well, we're already familiar with proc_freq and proc_logistic. Instead of proc_freq, we're going to use proc_survey_freq. And instead of proc_logistic, we're going to use proc_survey_logistic. These procedures are available in SAS. In these procedures, then we can add the 3 design variables, stratum, PSU, weight, or WT, and we have the 3 statements, strata, cluster, and weight. These 3 will be included every time we do enhanced analysis. The rest is the same. We're gonna do an association between the variables A and B. So, for example, in enhance, we'll have the different variables listed, and the sample weights will represent the unequal probabilities of selection, no response adjustments, and adjustments to independent population controls. So we are going to account for the fact that each person represents a certain number of people, and their probability of being selected is also different. So we need to use the proper sample weights. If we are only analyzing variables that were collected during the interview, then we will use the interview weight. If we are using any variable that was collected during the examination at the mobile examination center, then we need to use the MEC examination weight. Then we will use a stratum variable and a clustering variable determined by the primary sampling unit. It is critical to always include the design variables when conducting enhanced analysis so that we obtain the correct estimates and standard errors. If we ignore the stratification and oversampling, we will have incorrect estimates and incorrect standard errors. If we ignore the clustering, we will have incorrect standard errors, and we will end up with much smaller p-values, more significant p-values that are incorrect. Something else we need to be careful with when doing analysis for enhanced data is that we never want to use the where statement. For example, if we only want to study individuals who are over 40 years old, we don't want to use the where statement. That is because we then start breaking down the sample. The sample needs to stay together because it is the whole sample that will give us information on the representativeness of the US population. So the sample is selected to be representative of the US population. If we start breaking it apart and using small pieces here and there, then we will lose that information. So that cannot be done in enhanced analysis. We need to keep track of the big picture. So we always need to keep the entire sample from start to end. What we can do, we can use a domain statement instead. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to add a data step where we create a variable called pop, or it could be any name. So for example, in this case, if age greater than 40, then pop equal 1. It will be the population of interest. Essentially, it will be our eligibility criterion. And you can add multiple eligibility criteria. So for example, you could say if age greater than 40 and sex equal male, then pop equal 1. If the remaining population will be pop equal 0. But we will, as you can see, we're still keeping all of the data together. We're just creating this variable that it will tell us which data we want to analyze. Then, when we go to the proc survey freq and proc survey logistic, we're going to add the pop variable in the table statement before the A by B here. And this is in proc survey freq, so we're going to add this population here, pop, or we're going to add a domain statement in proc survey freq with pop here. You can see there is no where statement here. Then proc survey freq will produce results by the two different populations, pop 1 and pop 0, and we will only use the information from pop 1. And here again, we will only use the information in proc survey logistic for pop 1. But again, as you can see, the analysis is conducted on the entire data set. You can read more under these enhanced tutorials. These are fantastic step-by-step instructions. And you really want to become very familiar, very comfortable with this analysis. There are many published data and many published papers that you can review and perhaps try to reproduce those analyses as you try to become more comfortable with the analysis and then with this particular technique